Hey everybody, Chris here again. Welcome back to the channel. Always good to have you with us. So today, we're going to have a look at my Dell Optiplex SX270 computer. And I've actually had this computer since I purchased it in March of 2007. And it originally went into service in April of 2004. However, I don't consider it to be my first retro machine because I bought it when it wasn't retro. As you may recall from past videos, my first retro machine is a 486DX4 100, and that is what I hold true to be the case. Anyway, a fun little story about this. I did purchase it off of eBay for $250, and I bought this corresponding floppy drive to go with it for $8. I unpacked it from the box, turned it on, and what did I hear? Whistling. What does that mean? Well, this machine was built back during the capacitor plague. Fortunately, even though the machine was out of warranty, Dell had created an extended warranty. And a funny little story, the gentleman who came to the house to fix it took one look at it and said, "How do you have that? That's a commercial machine." So I confessed that I bought it off of eBay, but once again, since it was under warranty, he replaced the motherboard for me, and here it is. So since then, this machine has worked and run, but as I like to say, it's been running poorly, better than my other machines have been running well. In this form factor, it is particularly sensitive to heat. In a few minutes, we'll open it up and see the fans inside, and you can probably hear very faintly now that the fans are running. On this machine, the fans are always running. More on that in a minute. So anyway, let's get right to it, and let's have a look. So looking at the hardware, let's look at the power brick that connects to this machine. Typically with a desktop machine, the power source is inside. But since this machine is so compact, the power source is on the outside. And you can see that this power source is massive. It's almost half the height of the machine, maybe more. So that's pretty impressive. One thing that's also interesting about this power source is the end on it. Have you ever seen an end like that? This is a case where you don't want it to break because it might be very hard to source and replace. Now, being such a compact machine, cooling is very important, and I'm going to show you something. As soon as I plug this machine in, before it even starts its full boot process, the first thing you hear is a fan test. Yes, this machine gets very, very hot. So cooling is very important, and I think that's probably why it does a cooling test on power on. So looking at the front of the machine, you can see we have a power button, which gets illuminated when the machine is turned on, as well as a hard drive activity LED, a nice Dell logo, 2 USB ports, a microphone port, and an audio jack. And we also have some stickers here, a Pentium 4 sticker, and a design for Windows XP, and that's what this machine has on it that we'll look at in a few minutes. You'll also see that we have a removable bay here, and if I remove this drive, I have a 24X CDRW DVD drive in here right now, and what's interesting is this drive can also be used in a Dell Latitude C-Series laptop. Another accessory I have for this machine is a floppy drive, and if we look really closely, it'll say Dell Latitude CP Floppy Disk Drive Module. So that's kind of the concept, and we can definitely put that in the right way. I had it right the first time, and now I'll have a floppy drive for this particular machine. Though I think this floppy drive is a little bit sketchy, so it doesn't quite work. So that's the front of the machine. As we turn to the side of the machine here, you can see some dirt, which isn't particularly interesting, but you'll also see a pedestal on the bottom here, and that's what keeps the machine off the ground. And if I remember right, you can actually detach this, and I probably won't get this right, and you can flip it, and I think you can even put it on the other side. So if you want your machine to stand up like this instead, that's definitely an option. So that was kind of a cool feature of these machines. Turning to the back of the machine, you can see a variety of ports, including, once again, a audio jack and a microphone jack, as well as PS2 ports for a keyboard and mouse, that lovely bespoke power adapter, 4 USB ports, a network port, an HDMI output, a serial port, and a parallel port. And then at the very bottom here is a switch that allows us to open up the machine, which we're going to do here in just a minute. Let's go ahead and explore the inside of the machine. We do have this little green lever I pointed out earlier. If I push it down, out pops the hard drive. And this particular drive is an 80 gigabyte Hitachi drive. I'll go ahead and pull the cable off. And it's just a standard 2.5-inch laptop hard drive. You can see your connections there. This drive has a date code of December 2006. So that's pretty ancient. I guess the drive must have been put in a little bit after the machine went into service. Maybe it failed at one point. Anyway, so that's the drive there, and it's a Hitachi drive. Now if we push this button up, we can slide the side off and see the real goodness. And there you have it. Wow. Well, first of all, you can notice that this is a pretty thick shield. And actually something I failed to point out earlier, you can actually lay the machine on its side by putting the bracket in here as well. So it's got lots of options for configurations. But let's have a look at the inside here. You can see lots of opportunities for capacitor failure. There's tons of capacitors in different places. You can see a huge heat sink. That's what this is here, is a heat sink. And that processor does get hot. And at the bottom here, there are 2 fans that exhaust out here. So that's pretty significant, as you can see. But other than that, there's really not a whole lot to it. There's a heat sink over this chip here as well. And you've got your 2 memory modules that are in here. And these happen to be 512 megabyte modules. They are DDR 400 megahertz CL3 modules. I can pull one of those out. And as I touch down here, it is hot. Over here, this machine gets so super hot. So there we can see one of the modules. It's an Elixir module. I can't remember if I replaced these or these are stock. I want to say these are stock, but these once again are 512 megabyte DDR 400 megahertz chips. So just a few comments on some of the connectors in here. You can see there's like a chassis intrusion switch, as well as up front here, it looks like there's also a power lead for connecting up those fans and for them getting power, as well as some other front panel connections as well that come in through this. So pretty streamlined, pretty compact. Definitely not that difficult of a machine to work on either. You just have to undo maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 screws and the motherboard pops out and then you've got the whole system out. So that's kind of cool. In the name of science, let's pull off these fans and have a look at that CPU. And I'm very embarrassed. I think this needs a good cleaning. As I noted earlier, there's one connector for the fan on this side. It appears there's another one on this side. And there's that nice heat sink. Pretty massive. I guess we could go a little further and pull it out, though I've never done this. And as we pull this out, we can see that nice little Pentium 4 CPU under there, as well as a bunch of dust and probably some thermal paste. I should probably apply some new paste, but yeah, that's one heck of a heatsink, as you can see. Let's go ahead and clean that off while we're here. We'll sweep the floor later. Another thing we see here under the shroud of secrecy is a coin cell battery for the BIOS. I've actually never replaced this in all of these years. So this battery is still going, and it's a miracle that it's still keeping the time, because I have never replaced that. So something else I wanted to show you now that I have this all hooked up, actually 2 things. First, you'll notice I don't have any speakers hooked in. That's because this does have internal sound. And second, as we power this on, there's a series of indicator lights that'll show us where the machine is in the boot process. So I guess all green is good. So on startup, and yes, I do have the machine paused here. This is the first screen that you see. And we'll go ahead into the setup program by hitting F2. And it's going to boot a little bit slowly because I actually unplugged it, and it doesn't like that. It doesn't like to be unplugged. The BIOS screen will show up here, and unfortunately, I think I might have bothered that battery while we had it apart, so the date's all wrong, but that's okay. But you can see that Intel Pentium 4 processor at 2.8 gigahertz with 512 kilobytes of integrated cache. And there's the BIOS version, and probably not the service tag since the motherboard was replaced, unless when the tech did it, he set the service tag. Actually, it is the service tag as I read the back of the machine, so that is accurate. We can go in here into the drive configuration, and actually, if you listen closely, you'll hear, that's right, the fans are already picking up. And that's what happens with this machine. It tends to get very hot. Actually, let's have a little bit of fun. I've put my, my thermometer on top of the machine there. Let's see how hot it gets. I don't know how accurate this is going to be, but that's the best we can do. All right, as you can see, I get easily distracted. So, back to the BIOS screen. Oh, the fans are really kicking in now. Back to the BIOS screen, you can see we have some drive configuration settings, and right now that disk drive is registering, as well as a hard drive. And we do have Ultra DMA turned on, so that's good. And you can choose the boot sequence as well, and actually, wow, you can boot from USB with this. I was not aware of that, so that's kind of cool. There you can see the different sequencings there as well. If we go here into memory information, there you can see that gigabyte of DDR SRAM running at 400 megahertz. And here we can see information about that CPU and the processor ID. And I guess hyperthreading is disabled. That doesn't need to be the case. Let's turn that on. And let's make the CPU nice and normal, so that's good. Coming down here, we have integrated devices such as sound and network and mouse and USB, so you can basically turn off anything that you want, which is kind of cool. Module bay. So once again, the module bay is for this. That's kind of like a laptop. As well as the PC speaker and my 1 megabyte of onboard video. So that's kind of great. I don't know if we can make that bigger or not. Actually, we can. Well, let's go full guns on this and make it 8 megabytes. Into power management, we've got our different options there for power modes. And then we've got security if you want to set some password policies or what have you to denying Pixie Boot. You can do all that here. And then we've got our keyboard settings, whether or not we want auto power on enabled, and I do. So we can turn that to every day. As well as remote wake up, which is kind of cool. You can do a wake on LAN for this machine. And then we've got our fast boot and our IDE hard drive acoustic settings and the system event log. And I think we can go in here and look at it, and it'll show all the different errors we've had in the past. Looks like those have been registering for quite some time, all the way back to 2004, which, yeah, is when there was a CMOS battery failure. I think that's what becomes the default date and time. That's why you see that. So those are the BIOS settings. Booting up here, you can see Windows XP booting, as well as probably really start to hear those fans as they kick in. You can hear the startup sound there. And we're greeted with a Windows XP desktop. And I think earlier I went over to my computer at the start of the video and showed the properties. Here you can see all the system properties where we have that gigabyte of memory and the 2.8 gigahertz processor. And just to show why I don't consider this machine to be retro, back in 2007, I did set up a job that runs every day that does backups, and it has been running every day since. And what's kind of cool is that this job is set to turn the computer on if the computer is off. It will wake the computer to run the task. So that every single day at 7 p.m., I believe it is, we do a backup. Exploring some of the applications on this PC, this computer was originally set up so that my kids could play on it when they were much younger. So I made them little web browsers using Java. So it's got a series of buttons on here that they can go and visit websites. I imagine that several of these websites probably don't work anymore. But as you mouse over the buttons, it does play a little song. And we'll be careful here because we don't want to get any copyright violations. But it does play a little jingle for every single button that you mouse over and highlights it a little bit. And you can also power the machine off if you want. So I taught my kids about conserving computer power from an early age. As far as applications on this PC, there's really not very much. There's a installation of Perl, which I use for running that backup program. Yes, that's how old that program is. I wrote it in Perl, which is not a language that's as common these days as some may argue. As well as there's a photo editor on here and some games and some printer setup accessories. But most of this PC is actually set up for purposes of doing backups of some files on the network. So as such, I've got most of the space dedicated to that. Other than that, this is pretty much just your run-of-the-mill XP machine. I think I did install a DVD player on it for the kids to play DVDs and movies. But it's just your standard Windows XP machine, just in a much smaller form factor. So earlier in the video, you saw that I put a thermometer on top of the machine, and this is not very scientific, but just in the few short minutes that the machine has been running, you can see that the temperature has risen to 84 degrees. And actually, as I put my hand over here, it's even warmer, so I bet if we scoot it up here, it'll go a little bit higher. But yeah, this machine does get pretty hot pretty quickly. I'm not sure how hot to the touch an external machine case usually is, but this one definitely gets warm pretty fast. All right, that's what I had for you today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Definitely subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more content to come. I've got a lot of things in the works right now, so more things to come in coming weeks. Definitely ring the notification bell as well so you can be notified when those videos come available. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. That's fine too, and that helps us decide what sort of content we make in the future. Otherwise, that's what I have for you today, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.